One of the things that's kind of been a reoccurring theme in my life as of late is this concept of the unknown. Almost everything about our lives is unknown to us. Everything that we do know is what we've experienced, and probably what we've experienced days prior to today. Tomorrow is extremely unknown to all of us. You cannot predict what tomorrow will happen. You will hope that tomorrow you can wake up. You will hope that tomorrow maybe you go to work, and if you don't go to work, maybe you hope that you're just gonna be able to chill all day, right? But tomorrow is extremely unexpected. But I wanna have something reassured for your life and in your life, that is, that you have a calling on your life. That despite anything that anyone has ever told you that counters that thought, you have a calling on your life. You have a purpose and you have a destiny, and God wants to take you on a specific path in your life so that you would experience life as He's created it to be and for you. And there's this incredible scripture in Proverbs chapter 4 that I want to look at. I started in verse 20 that really speaks to the concept and the content that we're talking about this morning, which is in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 20. And it says, "My son, be attentive to my words, incline your ear to my sayings. Let them not escape from your sight, keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them, and healing to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life." Another version of that verse 23 reads, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Have you ever been in a car and you are the one driving, and in your car there is way too many people in the back seat? Have you ever had that situation? And these people are being driven, chauffeured by you, right? But all they do is talk way louder than they're supposed to. I don't know what it is about being in a car with a bunch of other people, but for some reason they think that you can't hear each other. So people will be sitting like right next to each other and yelling at each other so loud, talking about their days. And if you've ever been the driver, you're trying to focus on the road, but the noise and the volume is so loud that it actually hinders your eyesight. Has that ever happened to you? Like, I remember this one time that I was taking out a group of guys out, and we were doing some things in the streets, and we were just trying to get the word out, and we were just evangelizing, and the thing is that they were all teenagers, right, and teenage boys, and there was way too many in the car. The car fit maybe 4, maybe 5. Unfortunately, I don't know how we fit 8. I don't know how we fit 8, but we fit 8 into that car, and it was madness. And unfortunate for my wife, she was in the car with us, and she was right next to me. And I was trying to drive, but for some reason it was so loud that I couldn't see where I was going. I was making the wrong turns, going the wrong places. It was a nightmare, and my wife was like, "Juan, can you not see?" And I was like, "No, it's too loud in here." Have you ever experienced that before? Where it's just so loud that your vision gets blurred. Kara hates when we play music and I'm driving, because I get immersed in the music. You don't understand. When I hear the frequencies and the sound waves of the songs, it feels like I should jump in the pool of sonic rhythm and chord progressions, and I get lost. I'm in the song. The song is me, and the song is describing my experience. I get lost in the music while I'm driving. And so Kara hates when I have the aux, because when I have the aux, you already know it's about to be a party in the car. And she's like, "You are driving. This is not a fiesta." And I'm like, "Kara, you have to leave me alone. She hates driving with me when I have the aux, because all the voices, the melodies, all the content in the music is so in my head. It's the voice in my head that I cannot see clearly." And that actually happens to us in our daily lives. You have a calling on your life. And what a calling is if you didn't know this, people try to over-spiritualize everything. I want to let you know that at House, we do not over-spiritualize things that are just spiritual. What a calling is like what a father does with his son. And the son is hanging out in the playground doing whatever, and when it's time to go home, the father goes, "Hey son, we're coming over here." Or like if you have a dog, you let him out. I have a dog, I love him. He's furry, he's cute. I let him go, but he knows when I say, "Hey Chip, it's time to go," he follows me and he comes. What a call is on your life is God's voice over your life pulling you towards the direction that he's taking you. And so if you've ever had a confusion between what purpose and calling is, your purpose is your intention, the reason for your life. Your calling is what God wants to do with your life, and it's only with his voice. And it's by his voice. And so all of you here, I'm going to take the basic assumption that you understand that you have a calling on your life. But it becomes so unclear and so difficult to see ahead of us when every voice in the world is in our heads, because it actually makes our vision and our sight for where we are heading more blurred and more difficult to see. So in the scriptures, in Proverbs chapter 20 through 23, that verse 23 is amazing because it says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." You have to understand something about the Old Testament writers and the authors. They hadn't discovered modern medicine yet. They didn't have an understanding of the human body like we do today. And it doesn't mean that they were dumb. It just means that they didn't understand that chemistry happens within our body and it's actually in our head, in our brain. So when the scriptures talk about the heart, it's not actually talking about the heart. Not for the most part. I don't know if you knew this, but when the scriptures are talking about the heart, it's not talking about what's inside of your chest. Although they understood that what was inside of your chest is a heart, when they spoke about the heart and guarding your heart, what they were actually talking about was your mind and your emotions. See, they thought that all your thought processes began in your heart. Because if you've understood anything about the human experience, is that you've understood that everything is extremely nuanced. That all the decisions and all the rationale that you take has emotion behind it. And so they figured, what is the most poetic, what is the most beautiful thing that I can describe as the mind, as the emotions, and they would call it the heart. Have you ever had a broken heart before? Where for some reason your mind is just focused on the brokenness that was caused in your life. And your emotions make you feel sad and depressed, and also your chest hurts. And you think to yourself like, "Oh my God, I actually have a broken heart." And it's this incredible phenomenon in our lives that actually shows us that our thoughts, our emotions, and even our physicality are combined in one thing. So when Solomon says, "Above all else, guard your heart," what he is saying, above all else, guard the voices in your head, guard your mind, guard your emotions, guard your heart, guard everything that is within you, because that's actually going to dictate how you live your life. You see, the heart, when they talk about the heart, they're actually talking about the intention in your life. So when he says, "Above all else, guard your heart," he's saying, above all else, guard the intention in your life. For everything you do flows from it. You see, if you want to know what kind of life you are constructing and what kind of road you are in, look at the intention as to why you're on this path and why you're on this road. Ask the question of why, and you'll actually be able to answer the question of where you're going. So everything you do flows from it. I find this to be so incredible because God wants us and our attention to take us to where he is asking us to go. But there are things in our lives that we need to get rid of. There are voices in our heads that are actually keeping us from living the life that God has for us. So I want to take a quick few moments, and I want to kind of go in a pragmatic sense. I really don't feel like preaching to you. I kind of just feel like having a conversation with you. A conversation with you about some of the voices in our life that we need to get rid of. Because some of the voices in our head are actually not just keeping us from heading to where we are going, but actually taking from us the peace that we have in our lives right now. And by the way, over the years, I've actually learned to know the thoughts in the heart of people from the words that they speak. When you begin to develop this ability to reflect and the ability to ask yourself questions about why you think certain ways and why you have certain voices in your head, you actually begin to learn to see beyond the layers of the words that people speak to you and say to you. I remember talking to somebody who goes to house, and I'm here this morning, so I'll say it. And I was like, to them, I was like, you read minds, don't you? And she was like, no. I'm like, you do read minds. And I know you read minds because I read minds too. And it was kind of like weird. It was like, people around us were like, oh no, this is a cult. You know? It should scare you that I can, but it's not because I somehow have some psychic energy to read what's in your mind. It's because I've learned over the years that everything that comes out of you is a reflection of what's inside you. And so one of the things that we need to get rid of, one of the voices that have taken us away from truly seeing where we are headed in our lives and what God is asking us to do, is actually the voice of perfectionism. I'm somebody that's always dealt and struggled with perfectionism. Since I was a kid, I can remember my parents telling me, since I was like 2 years old, telling me, you have to be excellent. You have to excel. You have to be great. You are going to do great things in life. And as a child, of course, you want your parents to tell you that they believe in you. But over the years, I began to develop this perfectionistic mindset over my life. And what I've learned about perfectionism is that it actually doesn't help you get to where you're going. It actually takes you further away from the goals that you want to accomplish in your life. See, who here wants to accomplish greatness? Oh, well, and by the way, it's not something bad to want to accomplish greatness. Why not? Why not accomplish being great? Why not? Whatever you do, whether it be to be a servant, whether it be to be a business owner, whether to be a public speaker, whatever you do, why not be great? But what happens oftentimes is that we confuse excellence and striving for greatness to striving for perfection. And what happens is that we miss the nuances between excellence and perfection. You see, to strive for perfection and to have a voice in your head that tells you that things need to excel and that you need to be great and that there cannot be anything wrong isn't excellence. It's actually a nuanced way of saying that your self-value and your self-esteem is based on what you can accomplish. And that's a big difference between excellence and perfectionism. I know so many entrepreneurs, people who are like 100 years older than me, who say, I want to be excellent, I want to be blah, 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 but really they're perfectionists. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to break down the first voice, which is perfectionism. And my hope for your life is that you would make a choice, however old you are, however young you are, to make the choice of not living a life that is perfect, but living a life that strives for excellence. Yeah? So give me a clap so I can go ahead and remember what I was going to say. Oh, thank you. Our generation actually deals a lot with perfectionism. There's been a lot of studies on the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation that we've grown up on, some of us, and some of you who have raised up the millennials and the Gen Zers. And what we've actually found is that this modern generation is obsessed with perfection. That if their life does not look like Instagram, it actually causes them to live a life of shame and disappointment and discontent. They've actually found that, I believe, 2 out of 5 millennials, they struggle with perfectionism. Because they get to the age of 27 and go, oh my God, I'm not a millionaire. I'm not jacked. I don't have the best cars. I don't have retirement money. I'm 27. I'm gonna die soon, right? And I haven't figured anything out. And we have this society that's told the younger generations that they need to have everything figured out before the age of 30. No, some before the age of 22. Oh my God, if the Kardashians did it, so can I. Like, what? We've had this image in our minds that in order to have some sort of self-value, not only does the facade of perfection need to be present, but also true in our lives. And what's actually happened in our generation is that a lot of us have held a facade of perfection, and what it's actually created in our lives is a paralysis. It's created a paralysis in our lives because the only way that you can keep the facade of being perfect is if you do nothing. The only way that you can keep your image of perfection is to do nothing. Because if you do nothing, then you cannot risk failing. And oftentimes in our generation, in our modern times, what we've been told is that failure is equivalent to having no self-value. And the reason that we can deduct that many generations deal and struggle with perfectionism is because if something in our life fails or struggles, then it must mean that we are invaluable. So what is the voice in your head? When you fail in something that you've wanted to accomplish, how does that make you feel? Because the mind of someone who wants excellence versus the mind of someone who wants perfectionism is quite different here. If you're striving for perfectionism, when your accomplishments don't meet your expectation, they tell you that you are unvaluable. They tell you that your self-esteem should be at an all-time low. And that's why we live in a society where people are trying to gain and gain and gain and gain and be richer and be more known and be more famous because their self-value is on what they can accomplish, not on who they are. And the excellent mind that strives for greatness and gets to greatness does not have a self-esteem or a self-value based on what they can accomplish. Their self-esteem and their self-value is based on who they are. That's why oftentimes when you listen to the greatest sports athletes in the world, they often say that they're the best in the world. They often say, I'm the greatest in the world. All the time, I'm the best in the world. Even if it's not true. When you look at rappers that are really successful, right? They say, I'm the best in the world. But there's a nuance when people say, I'm the best in the world, and they actually do the best that they can within their world. You see, another aspect of perfectionism that lets us know that there is a voice in our head that is the voice of perfectionism is the one that helps us, or makes us rather, compare ourselves to other people's accomplishments. If you're someone who is of low self-esteem and cannot see for the life of you where you are headed because someone else is further than you, then you're actually not striving for greatness or excellence. You're striving to have your self-value based on your accomplishments, which means that there's a voice in your head that's telling you that you need to be perfect. There's nothing you can do. I mean, you can strive to be excellent. You can strive to be great. You can strive to be the greatest of all time. But I guarantee you there's somebody in Sweden right now who wants to be the best communicator in the world. And I want to be the best communicator in the world. Why not? But I guarantee you, he didn't sleep a full 8 hours last night. He slept maybe 3. And I slept 6. There's always going to be someone, no matter what field you are in, that is going to strive for excellence. But what actually helps people succeed is when they fail in their accomplishments, is their ability to get back up and continue. If you have the mind of a perfectionist, when you fail, it paralyzes you. Because everything that you've built, your preconceived notion of who you are, has failed you. And then there's 3 layers of perfectionism. If you are someone that struggles with perfectionism and the voice of perfection in your mind, what that can tell you and show you is that you create unrealistic expectations for other people. This happens like all the time when like there's a single girl looking for a man in church. She goes, oh my God, he's got to look like Brad Pitt. He's got to have the character of Jesus Christ, and he can't be wrong ever. You know? You know it's true. I know you're giggling, but like, I know you want to laugh. You're holding it back, right? When it's single dudes, they're like, oh, she needs to look like, I got to be careful, I'm married. But you say she's got to look like whatever, right? She's got to be the most beautiful thing ever. She can't nag me. You just go down all this list. You are asking for the perfect partner. And then you enter into a relationship and you expect for the perfect person who never fails you, who never does anything wrong to you, who is always the most attractive, who when they're at the age of 70, they'll look 30, right? You're looking for this person that is just going to meet this expectation of perfection. And what happens is that if you have the voice of perfectionism, you'll have a longer time searching for a soulmate than becoming someone's soulmate. Because you'll be looking externally everywhere. I need whoever best fits my description of what perfect looks like. And then when you enter into relationships with people, you actually begin to realize that they're actually like you, imperfect. And what can happen also in friendship circles, and this happens a lot in churches, and like I say, we're not really a church, we're more like a tribe or a community. But what can happen a lot in groups of people is that when we try to change our lives, we go look for perfect friends or perfect people who will steer us to the right direction. And when people do not meet our perfect expectation, we run from them because we think that confrontation means that there's no unity. And what ends up happening with the person who has the voice of perfectionism in their head is that they actually start looking for yes men instead of friends that will push them to expand their capacity. I want to ask you a question this morning. Are the people in your circle expanding your capacity, helping you elevate, or telling you you're just fine where you are? Because the thing about the perfectionists is that they will never risk anything. Because to risk means the option of failure. You need friends in your life who will push you to risk failing. But then, of course, that becomes really difficult. Because there's another layer of perfectionism, which is an unrealistic expectation over your own life. Most of the lonely people in our society are actually not people who are socially awkward. We have actually found out that people who are socially awkward are actually thriving in our society. Because you got phones, you got Instagram, you got whatever. You could talk to Shouty through text message. I don't got to talk to her in front of her face, right? So we actually found that the loneliest people in the world are actually not the socially awkward. It's actually the ones who have a high-level perspective of themselves, who think they are perfect. Now, unless you're a sociopath, you don't think you're perfect. But just because you don't think you're perfect, it doesn't mean that you don't expect to be perfect. You see, this is actually something that most of us deal with in our society and in our generation. And the way that you can know if there's a voice in your head that is telling you that you need to be perfect is if every single time you don't meet your own expectation, what you do is go back into the cave of the facade and the lies of your life. Like, how could you ever lie to yourself, right? But like, we all do it to ourselves all the time. We lie to each other, to ourselves. I'll do it better next time. So in order to not do it next time, I'm just going to do nothing at all. Have you ever met that person? You see, there's two extremes of perfectionism. There's the perfectionist that is a high achiever. And there's the perfectionist who is the person who does absolutely nothing. Because if they know it's not going to be perfect, they'd rather just leave it the way it is. Have you ever met that kind of person? You feel like that kind of person? They're like, I know I've been called to do this. I know my boss expects this of me. I know my wife expects this of me. I know I'm not going to meet the high expectation that I have for myself, so I'd rather do nothing at all. And what ends up happening is you become alone. Some of the most lonely people in the world are people who expect perfection out of themselves because they're always miserable because they never, ever become who they've been called to become. And what we find in the third layer and nuance of the voice of perfectionism is an unrealistic approach towards others that you think other people expect you to be perfect. And that's actually the most common one in our lives. If you've ever had a parent, you've dealt with this issue. Because there's been expectations that you think that people that you look up at have over your life, and that their expectation is perfection. Maybe you said, I won't let you down, and then you do, and you hide. Oh, shoot. Because you have this expectation that the person you're looking up to, or the person that you give a promise to, or whatever, is going to be so disappointed in you that they're actually going to leave you behind and not give you a second chance. And what I've actually found is that the person who thinks that other people expect perfection out of them are the people who forgive the least. Because what they begin to do is reflect what they think other people think about themselves. And so they do not forgive other people because they feel like they will never receive forgiveness because they did not meet an unrealistic expectation. And by the way, I'm not talking about your boss tells you to do a job, right? And you didn't do it, so now you're fired. Wow, he's a perfectionist. I'm talking about when you've been given a goal and you've been given a calling on your life, whatever it may be, and you don't do it to the best of your abilities, right? And you just give up. Or when you miss the mark. How many of us have failed at life? How many of us have, you guys raise your hands, so you guys are the most like honest. Hey, a round of applause for you guys. You're like, I didn't know if this was a moment to. It's like, that's a trick question. Should I be honest? Perfectionism doesn't, to have this sense of failure for example, if we were to set up a station and we had coffee and all the water bottles and all the fruit, by the way, whoever made that, did you make that? That's amazing. Yeah, another round of applause, yes. That's amazing. Sure. All I asked was, can you please put a cart together with this, that, and that? And she went above and beyond. But could you imagine if the expectation was, I wanted Christmas lights around it, and they had to be Fiji water, and all these things that look picture perfect, and what we end up doing when we don't meet that expectation is making our efforts seem lesser than what they really are. And we give all our strength and all our power and all our effort, and we become tired because they're not perfect. And by the way, that's how we act with churches. Because we have a vision of what a church that's been alive for 6 months should look like. Or we have a picture of what a church should look like. And by the way, whatever you think a church should look like aesthetically, doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Because you could be at a really pretty church with really poor content. And you can be at a really ugly church with really good, important content. But oftentimes when we go on looking for churches, we look at which one looks best on Instagram. I said it. We look at what we look prettier in and at. And this is such a normal church culture thought. And so we go from church to church to church because one day, the speaker decided to confront us about perfectionism. Talk about humanity again. No. And we go from place to place to place to place to place because we have been told before that there is an expectation over our lives and an expectation over the things that we do that need to be perfect. And there are more preachers, not pastors, more preachers that are more, I gotta be careful, that are more, I'll just say it, that are more concerned with how they look than who they're doing life with. And it just creates a cycle of perfectionism within church. And then we wonder why imperfect people don't want to go to church. Because they say, all the people in there, they think they're perfect. So why should I ever be in a building where everybody thinks they're perfect when they're just like me? And what often happens in the church culture is that it's a bunch of people chasing perfectionism and calling it holiness. Holiness isn't perfection. Sorry to break it to you, but I know you, and I know me, and we're not perfect. If holiness was perfection, there would be no holiness in this room. So what is it that robs our future from us? Is that in church we begin to think that we're looking for perfection, but also what we begin to communicate is that what God is asking of us is perfection. And we think that in order to accomplish the things that God has called us for and to, we cannot fail. But I want to tell you something this morning. Although some of us may be thinking that what God expects of us has a subtle hint of perfection, He's not asking for your perfection. He's actually asking for your yes. He's not asking for you to have it all figured out. He's not asking for you to be the best person in the world without a flaw, without problems, without issues. There is nothing that surprises God. He is not looking for your perfection. He's looking for your heart. And what that looks like, holiness, is that when you fail and when you fall, you get back up. And you do not go back and you do not hide from the confrontation of what God is calling you to. You keep running forward to Him. And oftentimes we've had more people leave church than be part of church because they feel like if they're not perfect, then they must hide away from a perfect God. But even though our God is perfect, His demand for your life is not perfection. Isn't that good news? His demand for your life is do not give up, do not stop, even when you fall forward.
Yes, sir.
And then, if we don't realize, if we don't see, if we do not quiet the voice of perfectionism in our life, it actually grows into a bigger voice, a louder voice that multiplies, called anxiety. Anxiety. Anxiety is so common in our culture. 1 out of 3 teenagers, 13 to 18, 1 out of 3 struggle with severe anxiety. And 3 out of 3 have anxiety. So if we were to make a count right here, although none of you are 13, if all y'all were teenagers, everyone in this room would be struggling with a level of anxiety in this generation. And the stats show that 1 out of 5 people ages 18 to 30 struggle with severe anxiety that leads to depression. 1 out of 5. You do the math. Anxiety is real in our generation. And by the way, it doesn't mean that all anxiety comes from this mindset of perfectionism. No way. But this is the most prevalent one in our culture. Because everything that we see online looks perfect. So we have a generation that is extremely anxious because they don't look like something that's fake. Something that's unattainable. But then there are other types of anxieties that are created in past traumas and past pain. An anxiety that was given to you by a father, an anxiety that was given to you by a mother. An anxiety created because you did not have. And now maybe you live today and you're anxious, even if you have everything, because once before you knew what it was to have nothing. And some of you have some pain and some anxiety that was birthed from trauma that feels like a weight over your life. An anxiety that doesn't just paralyzes you, but when God calls you to fall forward, it makes you completely just stop and completely transports your thoughts to a future that's unknown, even if what you need to overcome is the present. So much of our generation, so many people that struggle with feeling like the life out of their lungs is being lost through moments they cannot control. See, the anxious heart is anxious because it cannot control the future. But it's not actually because they cannot control the future. It's because they cannot control their present. They cannot control the voice in their head that tells them tomorrow you might fail. Don't get up. Stay up all night. Because if you stay up all night, I won't be whispering in your brain telling you about tomorrow. And it's an endless cycle of anxiety in our lives that leads to a voice that doesn't just tell us that our path needs to be perfect to Jesus, but also tells us that we're the wrong person to be on the path anyway. Because what if Jesus ends up being like the people I know and he fails me? And anxiety grows and grows and grows. My son, my daughter, be attentive to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Let them not escape from your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and healing to all their flesh. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Put away from you crooked speech, and put devious talk far from you. Let your eyes look directly forward, and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet. Then all your ways will be sure. See, there's something so powerful right here. Ponder the path of your feet. Look directly forward. Put away talk that is devious and evil far from you. Guard your heart. Be attentive to my words. Incline your ear. Let them not escape your sight. How can words ever be in your sight? Except if what you hear can change the way you view the world. I'll be honest with you. I don't think me simply telling you that Jesus is the answer is going to change your life. And you're going to be healed from anxiety in a minute. I've seen too much. I know that it can happen, but more often than not, what happens is that the conversation begins with Jesus, and the walk continues with you holding on to him. See, yes, Jesus will take away all your anxiety and your perceptions of perfection. But the ownership over your life and what voice you listen to is yours. Ponder the path of your feet means reflect on how you feel. Reflect on the voices in your head. Do not avoid them. Do not hide them. Confront them. And look at your feet. Where have they taken you? See, what God is telling us right here is that he won't leave us and he won't forsake us. But what he cannot tolerate is your indifference to change your own life. Because you have been given a spirit of self-control, of peace, of love, of kindness, of generosity. One that can overcome anything, but it begins, and I promise you, it begins with identifying the voice in your head and telling it that the voice of God speaks louder than it. And the words of God are so. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil. Simple. Harder than it sounds. But he is saying, when you identify the voices in your head that are not my own, identify it and walk towards my voice. If you are someone who has the voice of perfection right now, this is what God wants to tell you and say to you. You are worthy. Not because you are perfect, but because the perfect one made a way for you. You can strive for greatness, but you can also be gentle and kind and tender if your greatness is based on me. And he tells the anxious heart, I quiet the storms. I split the seas in half. The birds that chirp, the waters that flow, in abundance of who I am. Be present in reminding your heart that the peacemaker stepped into human history to create peace and life for you. I don't know where you are in your life this morning. I'm not sure what things you may be struggling with, but I know something that the voices that tell you that you are not enough and that your future cannot be entrusted to God is not the voice of God. Because God says, come. Literally just come. Just come.